Welcome to this week's episode of On Record PR, where we discuss the latest topics and insights that matter most to law firm leaders. I'm Jennifer Simpson-Carr, and this morning I'm joined by my colleagues Leslie Richard and Izzy Horan. How are you this morning?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm good.
So we are recording this episode to release on Monday, August 4th. For our listeners, if you joined us last week, Izzy and Leslie described the DigiMarCon conference 2025 that they attended in Brooklyn, which was an incredible overview of technology, digital, all things digital. And we talked a lot about novel uses of AI and how they could be applicable to law firms now to differentiate themselves and create a great deal of efficiency. And today we're going to dive into their SEO takeaways. So, Leslie and Izzy, very broad question just to get us started, but what were your top SEO takeaways from this incredible conference?
I think that one of the big ones was the difference between optimizing for SEO versus GEO, or Generative Engine Optimization. So search engine optimization, generative engine optimization. And they are a little bit different, but I think if people haven't heard the term zero-click search yet, it's definitely here. Website traffic is anticipated to really drop. Organic traffic by, depending on who you're reading, anywhere from 18 to 30 some percent this year, because as the AI summaries become more and more detailed, accurate, helpful, people will have will have less and less need to click through to people's websites. So the topic of generative engine optimization, how do you get listed as a source in those AI summaries, particularly in Google, that was a big topic. And sort of to bucket it in sort of very broad, probably slightly oversimplified terms, but just to help our listeners get an entry point into this topic. SEO is kind of keyword driven. It's focused on conversion and lead gen, and it is focused on your website. Generative engine optimization is topic driven as opposed to keyword driven. It's multi-platform. So you're looking at content spread across a digital ecosystem as opposed to simply focused on your website. It is more of a brand play than it is a lead gen play. It is more work, and at this point, it's less reliable because it's an evolving technology. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out. And it changes quickly, right? It changes because it's constantly developing new responses based on the huge amounts of data that these language models are processing. It changes more quickly than SEO does. So it has its place, and I think that there's still a benefit to traditional SEO. In fact, I asked that question directly in some of the sessions. Is it still worth doing traditional SEO, particularly if you're in a very niche industry and you're doing brand marketing? And the answer is yes. But you want to be thinking about some of the geo strategies so that you're prepared for what's coming, and so that your content and the way that you structure it and the way that you deploy it can be multi-purpose, so that you can be achieving your SEO goals and still preparing yourself for the GEO goals that will become more and more important as AI responses get more sophisticated. And that becomes the primary way that we search for and look for content.
So let's talk about that. I wrote it down. GEO more for a minute, because for years we've been advising law firms on SEO in terms of how they develop their content using thought leadership, right? And so I can imagine in a role now how frustrating it might be for someone in-house, right? I've told my attorneys that 2,000 word, and I'm, of course, I'm just
Yeah,
spitballing here,
sure,
but
sure,
right, long form content is what works. And here are the number of keywords and how often we should use them. Well, now Google might ding that because you're planting keyword. I'm thinking of like the evolution that we've had to
sure,
go through
sure.
to keep our websites and content up to date. So I'm just thinking a reaction to this might be, "Oh, here's another thing we have to know." So let's talk a little bit more about what they should be thinking about, or listeners should be thinking about when it comes to continuing SEO, like we know it, or what we should change, and then considerations for GEO, because as a thought leader, I'm sure law firm leaders want to be able to go back to their teams and say, here's something coming down the pike that's going to be really important, with our website as a really key resource for the firm.
Yeah. I mean, there is some good news in here, which is that there is crossover, right? The things that are good for SEO and GEO, there are still things that are the same, right? Google's need consistently, and I've been doing this for a long time, from the days when people were doing sort of black hat techniques of, putting white type on white backgrounds, which Google figured out in about 2 seconds, right? To sort of stuff keywords like that. And I'm dating myself. That's a hack from many, many years ago. But I think the message here is you don't uh, Google's goal always, Google's goal is not to get traffic to your website. They don't care about that. Their goal is to deliver high quality, relevant content based on a user search. So the importance of building your credibility and the importance of really providing unique, well-drafted, insightful content, that remains the same. What changes a little bit is some of the ways, for example, that we deploy. So in SEO, we really said duplicate content, really not a good thing. You want all the content on your website. Your website is kind of your hub. The website remains a really important hub, but it's now more important to distribute that content across other channels. So post your content to a LinkedIn newsletter, have long-term content on a Substack, do a lot of PR. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying this to be self-serving, but I'm saying it because trust factors are really, really important for GEO. And they're also really valuable for SEO. So when you've got a good link back to your site from a really high authority site like a Bloomberg, like an AP, like a Law 360, those backlinks are super valuable and they matter even more in GEO than they did in SEO. So building trust is super important. I mean, Izzy, what do you think about that in terms of building
Yeah,
trust? I mean, PR is one great way. What were some of the
yeah.
other ways that were mentioned?
PR was definitely one of the top things that was talked about at the conference. Another thing was also with this omni-channel sort of outlook, using it was discussed last year at a similar conference, short form video across like social media
Yes,
platforms
yes,
was huge, which is not necessarily using like typed out keywords, but topics that were being spoken about. Those people more and more are using social media platforms as search engines as well. That content also feeds into GEO. Again, we saw how people are using Google Knowledge Panels to build authority. This is when you Google a well-known person or thing, and then it shows up first before the Google's AI like sort of autofills,
summary.
summarizes. There's a person, it's their birthday, it's their address, it's what they do, what they're known for, pictures of them. That is also pulled via AI. Um, and that also adds to your sort of authority and credibility, which is what other like engines are pulling from as well. And then you can also claim those Google panels and uh, just control what goes onto them.
And they're different than snippets, right? They're different than featured snippets. They're different than a Google Business Profile. Google Business Profile is really based on your map, right? And your physical address. Whereas these knowledge panels are based on your kind of brand visibility in the digital space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are also fueled via PR as well.
So, we've talked about this on our podcast before, but there's the phrase, the EAT, which stands for expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So that's really the framework that Google is using to identify who to pull from when it's generating those AI summaries. So, another thing is just structuring your content in a way that makes it easy for Google to understand that you are answering a specific question. So a piece of content that has a question and then an answer. Q&As are great for getting featured in these AI summaries. So, what fintech is most relevant for this industry? And then an answer to that is a useful way to structure content that can get picked up by geo.
Yeah. There's also, I think people want to avoid this sort of like content cannibalization that can happen if you are using AI to create content, and that's then fueling the AI that is going to be then reading that content and disseminating it. There's sort of, it just becomes a sort of cannibalization cycle. So the people that don't use AI as like to create content are also going to be the ones that benefit from this geo. An SEO standpoint.
Yeah, which is another, just again, points to the fact that if you are creating something that has a unique perspective, that is actually providing valuable information, and that is in depth. And this is where I think a lot of attorneys and law firms are really well positioned, because they do have expertise and they do have in-depth knowledge on certain topics. And they shouldn't be afraid to share that knowledge online, because that's what's going to increase their digital footprint, right? They have expertise. They can go down in the weeds. They can answer questions that haven't already been answered. And that's going to be content that becomes increasingly important.
Right.
So this makes a great case for attorneys and executives who maybe have been resistant to thought leadership. It sounds like it is more important than ever at this point. One of the key objections we hear is it's been covered already. And a quick response to that, just because I know it might be what people are thinking, is that just because someone else has covered it doesn't mean it's been seen by your audience, and doesn't mean they have the same perspective that you do. So
yes.
So I want to thank you both for joining us again, and I want to encourage our listeners to follow up with questions, because these topics are complex, they are nuanced, and there is a lot of information that is consistently changing. And I know Leslie and Izzy, for our team, you are the ones who stay on top of that. You're sometimes advising our teams weekly on what's changing, what we should be thinking about, how we should be communicating with our clients. So for our listeners, thank you for joining us. Send us your questions and topic ideas, podcast@onrecordpr.com. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review, and we will see you next week.
Thanks. Nice to see
Thank
you.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com. On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson-Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabelle Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.